Welcome. My name is Lauren Payne, and I'm the director in the Malone Center for Career Engagement. On behalf of the Internship Office and the Malone Center for Career Engagement, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's event, A Roadmap to Careers in Consulting. We're really fortunate to have 5 wonderful professionals with us this evening that all have experience in the world of consulting, and they're going to share a little bit about their roles in consulting and also offer some advice to the students that are with us tonight about how to break into the competitive roles in consulting. We will begin tonight's event with the first 30 minutes. We have Dr. Jessica Hennessy with us, Associate Professor in the Economics Department. We'll be moderating a panel with all 5 of our professionals. And then from there, we will have an opportunity to break out into some small group sessions utilizing the Zoom breakout rooms. We're hopeful, depending on time, that there'll be an opportunity for you to engage with 2 of the professionals this evening. And then following the breakout sessions, we'll all come back together and there'll be an opportunity to ask any final questions and just to wrap up tonight's event. And just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Just as a reminder, I think most of you have your mute buttons on, but please, if you wouldn't mind muting your microphones when you're not speaking, we'd appreciate that. And then if you have any questions during tonight's events, please submit your questions utilizing the chat function, and we will do our best to get to those questions this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Hennessy, our moderator for tonight's program.
Great, thanks so much, Lauren, and thanks to the Malone Center and the internships program at Furman for putting on this webinar tonight. So I think one of the reasons why we wanted to have a consulting webinar is that the term is very broad and can mean a lot of different things. So the first thing I'd like our panelists to do is each one of them talk a little bit about kind of what consulting means from their perspective, kind of in their industry and in their role, both kind of broadly what it means and then also what it means on a day-to-day basis. What does your kind of job role look like? So we'll start first with Cameron Egan, if you could share.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. For me, so I've worked in 2 different consulting environments. One was a small boutique consulting firm that did economic and public policy research. And for that, we did more academic type research that we would then deliver to the client. And so it was a little bit removed from the actual client. Maybe it was a one-time project. Maybe it was something we did a few times a year. And then now I work for Booz, which is a large, mostly federal government consulting firm and does a lot of management consulting and IT. And that tends to be longer term contracts. For instance, I've been in the same role for, I guess, 1.5 years now, where you're more ingrained with the client, working with them every day, whether that's implementing a program or doing cybersecurity. There's a lot of different things, but it's kind of a different type of consulting, I'll say. But for both, I think the key term is just trusted advisor. That's what we kind of would say both at Keybridge, where I worked before, and at Booz Allen. And it's really just understanding the client's goal and mission, and then being able to bring that extra expertise or skill set to the table and help them meet that goal or mission.
Great, thanks, Cameron. Next up, I'd love to turn to a Furman friend, not a Furman alum, but we won't hold that against him, John Longshore.
Yes, I am a Furman friend. I could have worn my Clemson purple and it could have passed for the Furman purple, but I didn't do that tonight. So I am in site selection consulting. So most people don't grow up wanting to be a site selection consultant. They stumble their way into it. And the way in which I explain it to people here locally in Greenville is, how did B&W select the upstate of South Carolina, for their U.S. manufacturing facility? So we are the consultants who help with those decisions. So we help manufacturers, mostly in the U.S., but we do a variety of international projects as well, to help large manufacturers decide where to build, their new facility. So we take it from an idea to, we want to be in the Southeast, to actually identifying the site, negotiating incentives. And, for me, the reason why I got into this particular line of consulting is because I saw that there was a potential impact, a very broad impact to be had in communities on a pretty large scale. And so, when that company selects that community and creates the jobs and there's the investment, you can see it here in the upstate of South Carolina, just the large impact that BMW has had. And so big to small, we get to help companies, have that impact across the U.S. primarily. And a little bit on the reverse side is that about 20% of our work is actually helping the communities prepare themselves to land that new investment. And so that really is about helping them identify the opportunities regarding sites and their workforce on how they can position themselves to be more competitive. For me, on a day-to-day basis, so I started as an intern while in grad school, and I've worked my way up, and so right now a variety of projects and lead different consultants on executing a variety of projects, help implement new technologies within our firm, new processes, and help lead from a broader strategy standpoint, and not so much in the blocking and tackling of consulting as I used to do. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of what we do, and look forward to talking with a lot of you later.
Great. Thanks, John. So next I'd like to turn to Katie Love. Katie, can you share a bit about your perspective on consulting by working at Deloitte?
Sure. So I've been at Deloitte for about 8 years, and I would say consulting is really rooted in ambiguity and complex problem solving. So the world's constantly changing, markets change, leadership change, and consultants help people navigate those complex challenges and come up with a different perspective on solutions. So people have talked a little bit about that client relationship already, and in my day-to-day, I focus on human-centered design and customer strategy within the federal government, currently the CDC, which is a very exciting place to be, as you can imagine. Day to day, I'm sure like many of my peers here, it changes constantly, and that's part of what consulting is. I could be doing some ethnographic interviews or creating a strategy for how we best reach a certain market. But what you guys would do in kind of an entry level, what that kind of looks like day to day, what consulting might mean for you, is synthesizing those big problems and presenting those problems and the solution in easily digestible format. So it's not only learning how to solve the problems, but communicating your perspective really clearly. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. So next I'll turn to James Perez to talk a little bit about his experience. And James is not currently at Accenture, but he's going to tell us a little bit about his consulting experience while he was there.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Hennessy. How's it going, everybody? Consulting to me is all about opportunity. So I've been on the client side now. I'm with Duke Energy, but then I was with Accenture for about 2 years. And so I say opportunity because when you're on the consulting side, you're looking for opportunities at clients. So what's a weakness they have? What's a project that they need firms to bid on, like a problem to solve, like Katie said. But then when you're on the client side, like I am now, and I work with a lot of EY consultants, I have opportunities where I need help, where I need like a deep dive into like something that literally I just don't have the bandwidth for, and that our corporation doesn't. And so what consulting does is it fits in with the huge opportunities that are out there in the market that companies need help with, right? So every company couldn't be fully staffed for everything they need to. So these professional services companies step in and they equip their people with the skills to jump into a variety of roles. So like when I joined Accenture, I was at like an auto manufacturer and then an energy company. And I didn't have a background in either, but I could learn quickly and pick up skills. And so like Katie spoke about entry level, you become able to do a lot of things. And to me, that's a great opportunity then for yourself to learn. And, you know, when you get into the breakout rooms and such, I can explain, like, you know, it can be a pivot into, you know, a client you're at. That's exactly what happened to me. I love the variety of experiences, just, you know, from the 4 panelists, because it's not like accounting where it is kind of black and white. It can mean so many things. So hope that was helpful.
Thanks, James. And last, I'd like to introduce Ryan Tholanikunnel, who will tell us a little bit about his experience at Brattle. So can you tell us about your perspective on consulting from your time at the Brattle Group?
Thanks, Dr. Hennessy. So I spent 7 years working at the Brattle Group, which is an economic consulting firm. So economic consulting is a pretty niche area of consulting. But basically, we provide academic experts and industry experts who are witnesses and provide opinions for kind of governments and businesses in matters related to litigation and regulation. So if there's a court case where there's some numbers involved and you need an expert saying what those numbers mean, we're the people you come to. So on the litigation side, our experts would testify in these cases. And so this involves kind of putting together an expert report, which is kind of a written report that gets submitted to the court. It can also involve deposition from the experts, or experts actually get interviewed by the lawyers on the case and have to explain their sides. And then ultimately, assuming the case goes all the way to court, they would testify. And then we also do some things on the regulation side. So Brattle itself focuses on utilities in regulation. So basically they help companies navigate kind of economic issues that are primarily, and they do a couple other things, but primarily they're related to setting rates for the utilities companies, because as a lot of you know, utilities are monopolies and those rates are very heavily regulated. So like I said, econ consulting is a pretty niche area, but kind of day to day, the job really involves a lot of modeling in Excel and kind of working with financial data, working with numbers. But it can also involve sort of interacting with clients and sort of helping our experts get ready for their testimony and put their reports together.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So hopefully from this kind of brief overview, you're seeing some of the variety that consulting has to offer, both in terms of the types of industries you might work on, but also the nature of the client relationship, whether it's more project-based or whether it's a long-term relationship. So again, we're just trying to introduce all of our students to the variety of the options. The other thing we'd like to introduce our students to is kind of how you found yourself in these positions, right? How did you find your way to consulting? So Cameron, I'll start with you, especially given that you started off in, like, as you were describing, that kind of boutique public policy consulting firm and are now at Booz Allen. So can you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in that initial job and kind of how it led to your current position?
Yeah, thank you. So when I was a senior at Furman, I knew I wanted to move to DC because I had a great summer experience there, but was looking kind of all over the place at think tanks, some federal government, and then some different consulting options, but really didn't know much about it. But I knew I really liked economics, but wasn't ready to necessarily go do a PhD or something like that, and was trying to figure out what opportunities there were for me. And I actually had a classmate who had applied to Keybridge where I worked out, and he decided to go into a different industry, but said, Cameron, you should see if they're still hiring. So I did and went through this interview process, and it was a great fit for a first job. It was in DC. I did a lot of macroeconomic research, which I really enjoyed. And then I got more involved in the policy research side while I was there for 3 years, and then kind of hit a point where I was looking for something a little bit different and ended up going back to grad school, and I got my master's in public policy from Duke University, which was a 2-year program, because I knew I wanted to get kind of those policy skills and kind of take a step back and see where I wanted to go from there. And while I was at Duke, I got connected with Booz Allen and ended up doing an internship at Booz Allen between the 2 years through kind of a recruiting channel they had set up. And was interested in trying that type of consulting because, as I said, it was a very different kind of approach. It was a very huge company that did lots of different types of consulting for the federal government. And I think, as Jessica just mentioned, was more ingrained, kind of more longer term contracts versus the research that I'd done at Keybridge that was a little bit removed. So I decided to do, take a shot, work at Booz Allen, and I've been there for 2 years, and it's been a great experience, especially after kind of that initial few years at Keybridge. So that was my path.
Great, thanks, Cameron. So John, I'd like to kind of return to something that you had said about your path to global location strategies, and in that it's something that seems obvious once you know what site consulting is, but it's something that most people, right, are like, oh, I've never heard of that before, So how did you become aware of that? How did you find your way to global location strategies?
Yes, so I was in grad school at Clemson. I got my undergrad in civil engineering and was getting my master's in city planning, but was heavily focused on real estate development and thinking that I was headed that way primarily. And while in the program, found out that an alumni, pretty well known in the profession, had come through and started his own site selection firm. And I said, what is site selection? So began looking into it and thought I'd be pretty good at this. I think that this really, there's a lot of kind of my purpose and what I wanted to accomplish in my career. It seemed to really match up. And so I just did the old fashioned, I'm just going to bother people until they talk to me approach. Site selection is primarily made up of a lot of boutique firms. Either they're small boutique or they're a very small arm of a real estate firm. And so I was getting married. I had to stay local. Greenville, South Carolina has a very high concentration per capita of site selection consultants. You'll find out. And so I bothered my now boss incessantly, and I just kept getting out of office. That's kind of the site selector mantra, right? Or traveling, so out of office. And so I had other internships lined up for brokerage firms and real estate developers, and last minute my now boss got in contact with me, and I said, listen, we got to do this quickly. And so ultimately we met up. It worked out. Interned for a year, my last year of grad school, and I have been on ever since. So if you want something and you don't hear back the first time, keep after it.
Good advice generally, right? Never take no for your first, second, or third answer. Katie, you're up next. So I'd like to know a little bit more about just how you arrived at consulting and kind of what kept you engaged in that industry. We see from your bio that you've gone to business school, but have now, stayed at Deloitte. So tell us a little bit about your path.
Sure. So I'm so impressed by the students here, as consulting was not even a little bit on my radar as a senior, so you guys are already ahead. I found out about the industry from Dr. Hennessy and her class. So at that point, I researched companies, I researched what consulting was. I reached out to Furman alumni to learn more. I reached out to people who didn't go to Furman, but were in my network, and I think that's actually how I ended up getting an interview. It was a friend's mom worked at Deloitte, and she talked to me. And so if you're talking to people, one, it really helps to have someone recommend you if possible, and then demonstrate a real interest in consulting and understanding of what it is and why you'd be a strong hire. So as you think about talking to different people about where they work, that's not really a consulting specific thing, but just as you move forward in recruiting over the next year or several years. And what kept me at Deloitte is, oh gosh, a lot of different things. It's a really hard profession, and if you're at Furman, you probably really enjoy a challenge, and this career is very challenging and it changes constantly. And I started doing process improvement in healthcare, transitioned to do more strategy and innovation with the TSA. And then Deloitte has a pretty selective program to sponsor their staff members to go to business school. and I was selected to go back to school at UVA, the Darden School of Business. And there I really discovered a passion for human-centered design and customer experience. So then I transitioned my project work to be more centered around that work, and that's what I'm doing now at the CDC.
Which now makes total sense, given that you kind of started out in your Furman career kind of really interested in some of that behavioral economic stuff. So coming back to that.
Exactly. Full circle.
Full circle. Okay, James, you're up next. And I'm assuming that some of the recent comments by Katie and John about the power of networking in getting into consulting resonated with you a lot. So can you tell us a little bit about how you broke into consulting?
Definitely. I also thought Katie said that she heard about consulting from a Dr. Hennessy podcast. And I was like, wow, I need to listen to that. But I think she said class. But if you have a podcast, let me know.
Not yet.
So yeah,
I'll let you know.
Not yet is the key. Yeah. So I, upon graduating, I took a job that I really wasn't that jazzed about, which is like a story in a lot of ways to like, just if the first job you take and you're not super excited about, don't be discouraged because it is just the first job. But then literally was like starting to decide I wanted to get into consulting. So like Googling it, how do you get into it, talking to people about it. And on a trip to visit a friend in Boston, was just explaining to a friend's friend I was interested in consulting. He said, oh, my dad's worked at Accenture for 35 years. You want to talk to him? And I was like, yeah, of course I want to talk to him. I'd met this guy for like 10 minutes. So always take an opportunity to talk to someone's parent or friend. And yeah, that just led to interviews. And then what was great too was there was a Furman alum who's actually also since left Accenture, who had been there for about 15 years, got connected with her. So all that to say is just like, keep turning over every rock you can. And that's for any industry you're trying to go into. Because there was another industry out of Furman that I tried to get into and it just didn't really work. But consulting did, and it was a really good path for me. So that was awesome. Hopefully more firms can come to campus because you guys are all very eligible candidates. But networking was key for me.
And James, before I let you go, I think just in case students didn't recognize this, your current position at Duke was because Duke was a client of yours at Accenture, correct? Is that common to move to a client?
I'd say it's like a mixed bag. There was actually another Accenture employee that moved right before me. I think it can depend. I think sometimes people transition it to, they've been in an industry for a while, like energy, and then they go work at a maybe different energy company that maybe they necessarily weren't at. But for me, I grew really strong relationships. I'm in like the digital customer group. So a lot of what Katie's talking about, I focus on our energy customer. And I got really entrenched in that group, and they offered me a job. So yeah, it worked out.
That's always good to hear. Okay, Ryan, you're up next. So kind of like John, Ryan's, as you mentioned, was in kind of a very boutique area, very niche area of economic consulting. So I'm curious kind of how you found your way there. I also want to know a little bit more about, what about it invigorated you to stay there for 7 years, and how did that lead to you pursuing an MBA currently?
Sure. So my senior year, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do. And so I was doing a lot of like going around to professors, talking about professions and kind of what exists out there. And Dr. Hennessy actually introduced me to the world of economic consulting. If I remember correctly, she had a stint in economic consulting. So we talked about that quite a bit. And one of the things that really turned me on to it was kind of the broad access you get to industries. So most economic consulting firms, I won't say all of them, but most of them are pretty industry agnostic. So you have certain types of cases, but you're working for manufacturing firms, you're working for retailers, you're working for I worked for an airline. Like you get access to all kinds of industries, which I thought was really cool. And I wanted that so I could figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so that kind of has rung true throughout my experience at Brattle. And then in terms of, why I stayed there, I think one of the things I really enjoyed about Brattle was sort of the academic rigor behind what you're doing. So all of these cases that I'm working on eventually are going to court. And when you go to court, you have to convince a judge that you're right. You also have to stand up to all of the scrutiny that the other side is going to put against you. So they're going to read your report, they're going to rip it to shreds, and you have to be able to stand up and defend everything that that expert has put in their report. So even the smallest of assumptions, you have to do tons of research behind them, have tons of data to back up why you made that assumption. And for me, that was just a really cool part of the job, was having to do so much just interesting behind the scenes research. And then in terms of deciding to go to an MBA, maybe 3 years into being at Brattle, I got put on a lot of disputes over mergers and acquisitions cases. So mergers and acquisitions are when two companies either combine into one, or one of the companies has bought the other company. And disputes arise because sometimes minority shareholders, so someone who owns less than 50% of the company, might not have had a say in the case, in the sale of the company or the merger. And they think that the process was unfair in some way. They paid too much, or they didn't get paid enough if they were the one being sold. And so I spent a lot of time on these cases and really enjoyed them, really enjoyed the finance aspect to them. And that sort of led me into wanting to follow finance and got me into wanting to go into an MBA program.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So something that I'm hearing from all of our panelists here is, the variety of things that they're able to do, the challenging problems that keep them intellectually stimulated, which I know all of our Furman students are like that, ever curious. But I'm curious to know a little bit more from our panelists about what other qualities make for a good consultant. So what characteristics, skills, abilities have you found have made you an effective consultant? Or if you've been in a supervisory role, what types of skills, attributes are you looking for in interns or in, analysts coming straight out of undergrad? So we'll start with Cameron again.
Great. I think everybody will probably agree about a few of these, but definitely writing and communication, even if it's just writing emails to clients or putting together PowerPoint decks, it's key. And you realize that a lot of people actually don't have that background. And I think the liberal arts education is a huge part of that, where you can show, even if you're, economics, it has some writing, some quantitative, you still got that foundation of liberal arts, that there was ultimately a lot of writing and communication. So that's key. And I found that kind of throughout my career so far, but also just in terms of, I guess, your attitude. I think people really appreciate if you're adaptable, and that's doing different projects, being the one to volunteer to do different work on the same project, whether it's the most exciting or the not most exciting, and willingness to learn. I think a few people have said it where, you get into a project, you have no knowledge of it, but just kind of be able to dive in there and take initiative, and just go for it instead of having someone tell you exactly what to do. I think a lot of people look for that, especially in the lower levels, because it can take some time to, start with that approach. So I know that's pretty general, but I do think, that's just the way to kind of really catch someone's attention, especially early on, and get more responsibility for yourself.
Thanks, Cameron. I'll turn to John now. And John has been a great supporter of our Furman students and taking them as interns. And so what do you look for, John, when you're looking at those intern applications? What stands out?
Yeah, I guess from, just the X's and O's perspective, right? The analytical skills, the ability to write, your report, ability to create reports and deliver on a presentation, stand in front of somebody and with confidence. You can be wrong as can be, but if you're confident in it, that does communicate something to me. And so there are some of those aspects that we do look for. Then there's this intangible thing that it's hard to put on a piece of paper and describe, but Simon Sinek wrote this book called Start With Why, and it really is about why are you doing what you're doing? What is your purpose? And so we'll find students who are really good problem solvers, but they don't know really what they're doing. They don't know why they're trying to apply to be a consultant or at least an intern. And for me, that speaks volumes. One, you're trying to figure it out, and I get that, but have some sense of why you're doing what you're doing and why you think you want to be a consultant. Because if you're just good at solving problems, if you're just good at analysis, doing presentations, consulting will eat you alive. If you don't have a kind of a deep, this drive, this purpose to serve others, to help others truly, and you just think you have a skill set that you're going to be a good fit for consulting, you'll get burned out in 2 years and you'll be off doing something else. There are certain firms that are maybe notorious for that, but really it's, if you have that desire and that purpose to serve, help others along with the skills, then you'll go far.
Great, thanks, John. And I think the advice to kind of think about the why is really important. And so the great thing, students being here today, is you're learning more about these different things so that you can articulate that someday, about why you're interested and why you're passionate in these different areas. So I know we're going to head to the breakout room soon, so I'll just have one more panelist share ideas about characteristics and qualities. So Katie, would you mind kind of offering some insights into what characteristics make for a good consultant?
Sure. So I'll echo what everyone else has said. I think curiosity is a big piece of it. I would say being extroverted is not something you have to have. I know there's a lot of we interact with clients all the time, but don't worry too much about that. I'm not sure there are too many unique things about consulting, but some things are amplified. Like they expect a lot of you. So drive is extra important. Motivation is extra important, especially at a more junior level. People will expect you to put in more hours. We're not sure you can truly learn what you need to learn in the typical 9 to 5. So if you want to get ahead, that's kind of how you show that motivation, that commitment, that dedication. And then similar to what John and Cameron were both saying, I have a lot of analysts who are very good at being told what to do. They produce really good stuff when I tell them what exactly to do, but really listening and thinking about the problems we're trying to solve and either proactively coming up with, I heard we needed notes for this, so I just wrote them, or I had an idea for maybe a solution to this, even if you're wrong, per John's point, like the fact that you're putting some energy into it beyond what's explicitly being asked of you is a huge plus.
Great, thanks, Katie. So I think we'll now move to the breakout rooms, and there'll be lots of people in your breakout room. So if you don't have specific questions for your panelists, don't worry. There will be plenty of people there to seed the conversation. But Lauren, are you ready to send us in?
I think we're ready. So the plan here is that I've gone ahead and assigned everyone to a breakout room based on your registration form. And what we're going to do is, for time's sake, we're going to keep you together with the same group. And so after about 8 minutes, we'll rotate in your second professional. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the rooms, and I will give you all a 1-minute warning before we transition to the second panelist. Ling, I'll put you in a room in just a minute. I'll put you in a room in just a minute. I'm in the middle of just transitioning, so I'll get you in just a second.
Sure, thank you.
Lauren?
Did you not get moved?
No, I didn't.
Okay, give me just a minute. I'm still working here.
Okay.
Lauren?
I'll move you in I'm working on you.
Okay. I decided to pull myself out.
Oh, okay.
Hoping for the best.
Okay, I'm looking for you right now, John. There you are.
I did the same thing John did.
Oh, okay, that's why you didn't move over. Okay, John, let me see where you're going. John, you're going to be in room 3. John, you're moving to room 5. Which doesn't, oh, you should be, it says you're there, John. I'm not sure.
Me, John?
John Longshore or John Barker?
Oh, John Barker. Okay,
I left Ryan in room 5.
Okay, John, let me see.
Here comes Mr. Coe.
John, move to, I'm moving you to room. Problem is it says you're where you're supposed to be. Join. I'm gonna move you maybe to a different room.
Okay, wait a minute. I clicked down on the bottom right where it says breakout rooms, and it says you've been assigned and join breakout room. So I'm gonna
Okay, so just click on the button that says join breakout room if there is one.
And it's going to send me back to 5, but I can go back there, Lauren, if you want me to.
Okay, go back there for just a second and I'll move you. Into do you see, you don't see a button, John, that says to join?
No. Oh, it didn't pop up. It's just join breakout room.
You should be going to group 3. Andy, you're still here.
Where do you want me to go? There, I have the option to go to 4, but that's where Kristen's there now, so I'm not sure if it makes sense for me to go back. I can go there.
You're going to group 3. So it says that you should be going there. I put you there. Okay, Ming, let me just make sure I got everybody there and then I'll get you where you're supposed to be.
Yep, no problem.
We're just transitioning into group, so it took a little longer than I had anticipated.
Yep.
Okay, I got that all taken care of. Which room would you like to go into? Did you have a preference, Ming?
I don't really have.
I think you had selected Katie Love. Did you already go into a room with her?
Yes, I just came from room number 1.
Okay, I'm just gonna put you then in, let's see where you were. I'm just gonna put you in room. Let me see where we have the least amount of people. I'm gonna put you in room, I'm gonna put you in room 4, okay?
Yeah, sounds
Sorry
good.
for the wait.
Okay, you're good.
And I think you're just gonna have to click, there should be a
Oh, I have
button.
to click. Oh, okay, I found it. Yes, thank you.
Yep, bye.
So Lauren, should I just do kind of one question to?
Yeah, I think one maybe final question to wrap up. There were a few challenges with some of the transitions. So some of the groups didn't probably get to spend quite as much time. So.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're all back from our breakout rooms. Hopefully that was a good experience for everyone, either asking or at least hearing others' questions. I want to be mindful of our time today, so we just have a few minutes left. One question that's come up, I've had some students send me a chat, a few different ones, and they're interested to learn more about graduate school and kind of how that intersects with consulting. So many of you, began your consulting careers just straight out of undergrad or with a little bit of job experience. So you don't need it necessarily for that entry-level job. But at what point does that become important, and what are the different types of avenues that you could pursue? So we'll start with Cameron.
And it's funny, we were just talking about this in the breakout room, but for me, it definitely helped to work a few years before going back to grad school. And I knew I wanted to maybe go back to school, but actually it wasn't until I was at Keybridge for 3 years that I felt confident in doing a public policy degree. But there's, of course, MBAs and other programs that people do. And I think it's a big commitment, so it's good to think that through. But I do think it helps, particularly in a place like DC, where people tend to be very educated here. And I think that work experience in consulting actually really lent well to doing well at grad school at Duke, just because I was used to taking new challenges and working in a fast-paced environment. So it set me up well for there and for Booz Allen.
Thanks, Cameron. John, I'd like to specifically ask you, just in terms of area, you mentioned you were in civil engineering. Is that an important component of it if you were to work your way up in site consulting, or does it still remain relatively broad?
Yeah, I mean, site selection is, I would say, a mile wide and a foot deep. We're not tax experts, but we can talk a pretty slick game. Utilities, we're not experts on, electrical rates, but we're pretty good at it. So you see people come into this type of consulting from a variety of different industries. So economics, accounting. My boss was a architectural major, and for me, the civil engineering and the planning, real estate development was really a perfect mix for the type of site selection that I do, which is more technical in nature. And so, yeah, there's no formula for this particular type of consulting, but as long as you get a good basis and good technical, whether it's economics or anything like that, then you could find your way into it. It's not a very broad profession. It's not like there's up in every city left and right, but if you really are interested to get involved with it, then you're going to have to really start at the bottom, work your way up, try to get in wherever you can for this type of internship. But grad school, I told some people in our group, take some time, figure out what you want to do, right? Because you're just going to go get the degree without really the purpose behind it. You might just be wasting a lot of money.
Good advice. That's also, I know someone Ryan had mentioned that I was in economic consulting. So I took 3 years between undergrad and my PhD program and worked in economic consulting. And it was a useful experience, as many of our panelists today have talked about. I'll kind of wrap up here since we're at 8 o'clock. As many of our panelists here have talked about, consulting was a great entry-level job for me because it exposed me to different sides of the transaction, right? So I got to see the client's perspective. I worked in litigation consulting, so I got to see the legal perspective. And so for me, and I got to see the economic perspective, working with the PhD economists. So for me, it was a good opportunity to kind of see what those different paths would look like. And at my economic consulting firm, we had people go on to get their MBAs, some went on to law school, and I went on to get my PhD. So kind of no matter what the different variety of consulting it is, I think what it does, especially for an entry-level position, it exposes you to lots of different puzzles and problems in industries and different potential careers. So it's a great way to kind of see a broad scope. So I'll turn it back over to Lauren for kind of the closing thoughts here today. But thank you all for joining and great questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hennessy, and a big thank you for Dr. Hennessy for facilitating this evening's panel, and also we're so grateful for all of the professionals that joined us this evening as well. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your support. To the students, thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to join us this evening. We'll be sending a follow-up email to all of you with some resources as far as potential career opportunities and internship opportunities in consulting, along with some other resources that will help you navigate the field of consulting. I did want to quickly share with you all some upcoming programs that are scheduled to take place during the next few months here. So on September 16th, we'll be having a How to Navigate the Job Search During COVID-19 event. We will do our LinkedIn 101 event on September 22nd, and there'll be an opportunity for students to have free LinkedIn headshots taken on September 24th and 25th. On the 13th of October, we'll be doing an Opportunities for Social Impact in Washington, D.C. program. And then we will be launching our virtual career fair on October 21st. So once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you have a great evening.